The wind blew hard that morning, carrying dust, shame, and the sound of laughter that cut sharper than a whip. The year was 1872, and the mining town of Red Hollow sat like a scar on the Wyoming border, half built on hope, half buried in cruelty. They dragged her out by her arms. A Chinese woman, thin as bone, clothes torn, holding a child in each hand. "Get out! Thieves!" someone shouted. A rock struck her shoulder. She didn't even cry out. Her name was Mei Lin, 29 years old, though hardship had made her look older. Beside her, her son Leon, 10, stared at the ground, his small fists clenched, while his sister Su Mei, 7, tried to hide behind their mother's torn skirt. The crowd jeered, men in coal-black coats and red faces, the smell of whiskey and dirt hanging heavy. A few women looked away, ashamed but silent. A miner with missing teeth held up a pair of dull shears, grinning like the devil. "Next time you steal bread from a white man's table," he sneered, "remember what happens to thieves." Then came the sound, snip, snip, snip. When they were done, 3 shorn heads glistened in the morning light. Mei Lin stood still, holding her children. Her breath was shallow, her pride burning away like ash in her chest. She whispered, her voice trembling yet defiant, "They shaved me and my kids bald." And that's when a man's voice cut through the mockery. "Enough!" The laughter faltered. From the shadow of the Red Lantern Saloon, a tall man stepped out. His boots crunched over the dirt. His face was carved in lines of sun and war. A man who'd seen too much and said too little. Eli Harrow, rancher, ex-soldier, and the last person anyone expected to interfere. He looked at the crowd with cold, gray eyes. "Y'all had your fun," he said evenly. "Now let them be." "Not your concern, Harrow," one miner spat. "We're teaching these rats some manners." Eli's gaze didn't waver. "I said that's enough." Something in his tone, low, iron-hard, made even the drunkest man take a step back. Red Hollow knew Eli. They knew the story of the one-eyed outlaw he'd once faced down alone, and the scar on his jaw that proved it. The crowd muttered, scattered. When it was over, Mei Lin stood trembling, children clinging to her legs. Eli walked up slowly, took off his hat, and knelt so his eyes were level with hers. "You got somewhere to go?" She hesitated, clutching her children tighter. "No," she whispered. "Then you're coming with me." Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because no one else will." He extended his hand. Leon looked at it, then at his mother. His fingers trembled, but something in Eli's eyes, that steady, wordless kind of strength, made him reach out first. Eli hoisted the boy up onto his horse, then helped Mei Lin and her daughter climb behind. Townsfolk watched, whispering. "Old Harrow's gone soft," one man muttered. "Taking in Chinamen now. Reckon he's lost his mind." Eli ignored them. He climbed into the saddle, turned his horse toward the fading sun, and said simply, "Hold on tight." They rode in silence for miles. The town vanished behind a curtain of dust and snow. The land stretched wide, mountains to the west, ghostly and blue, and to the east, plains that seemed to never end. The air grew colder. Mei Lin pulled her children close beneath the threadbare blanket Eli had given her. Every hoofbeat echoed the memory she wanted to forget. Back in Canton, before the sea voyage that stole her peace, Mei Lin had been the daughter of a silk weaver. She remembered the smell of rain, the laughter of her younger brother chasing fireflies. America was supposed to be a dream. Instead, it had become a wound. She thought of her husband, Wei, a miner who believed gold could buy them freedom. But the mine took him, crushed by a falling rock, and the foreman blamed it on carelessness. No one paid a widow. No one cared for orphans. Now even her hair, the last piece of her dignity, was gone. Snow began to fall, soft as ash. Eli reined in his horse at a ridge. Below lay a valley blanketed in white. Smoke curled faintly from a chimney far in the distance. "My ranch," he said quietly. "It ain't much, but it's warm." Mei Lin didn't answer. She was too tired to speak, too afraid this kindness was another trick. But when she glanced at him, his coat worn, his hands callous and rough, his face lit by the glow of dusk, she saw no cruelty there, just weariness. and maybe the same loneliness she carried. They rode on as night deepened. The forest thickened, pines bending under snow. A wolf howled somewhere beyond. Then, in the quiet between heartbeats, came another sound. Hooves! Eli tensed. He turned in the saddle. 3 riders were following. "Hold the kids," he said softly. The riders drew closer. Men from the mining camp, their laughter like broken glass. "Eli Harrow," one called. "You took our Chinawoman. Hand her over." He didn't reply. Just clicked the hammer of his rifle. "Last chance, Harrow. Ain't your fight." The rest was lost in the roar of a gun. The first bullet whined past Mei Lin's ear. She ducked, pulling the children down behind the horse. The air filled with smoke and panic. Eli fired once, twice, clean, deliberate shots. One man tumbled from his saddle. Another's horse bolted. The third kept coming, screaming curses, revolver flashing. "Stay down!" Eli barked. Mei Lin covered Su Mei's eyes as Liang hid behind a rock. She felt every shot like thunder in her chest. Then silence. When she dared to look, the last rider was gone, his body sprawled in the snow. Eli swung down from his horse, breathing hard. The smell of gunpowder clung to the air. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded faintly, her voice shaking. "You killed them." "They'd have done worse," he said. He knelt, picked up a fallen revolver, and tossed it aside. His jaw was tight, but his eyes softened when he looked at her children. "Let's get you safe." She looked at the snow-streaked trail, then back at him. "Why help us?" He shrugged. "Guess I got tired of watching good folks get hurt." The words sounded simple, but something in his tone carried old pain, the kind that doesn't fade with years. By the time they reached the ranch, the moon was high, silvering the world. The Harrow Ranch was humble, a single log cabin, a barn, a few horses and corral. Wind whistled through the eaves, but light glowed warm from windows. Eli opened the door. "Go on in." The air inside smelled of wood smoke and stew. Mei Lin hesitated at the threshold, the memory of every door slammed in her face haunting her. But when Su Mei stumbled from exhaustion, Eli lifted her gently, carried her to bed, and tucked her under a blanket. The girl's eyes fluttered closed before her mother could protest. "Sit," he said to Mei Lin, nodding toward the fire. "You look about ready to drop." She sat. The warmth hit her face, and tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. For the first time in months, she wasn't freezing. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her without spitting after. Eli poured her a tin cup of water and sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "You can stay here for a while," he said, "till you figure things out." She met his gaze, uncertain. "They'll come again. The men from town. I'll deal with them. You risk much for strangers." He looked into the fire. "Wasn't long ago I was one myself." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with all the things they didn't yet understand about each other. She watched him mend his rifle, the steady rhythm of his hands oddly comforting. The crackle of fire filled the room, and outside the wind eased. Liang curled up on a rug near the hearth. Su Mei murmured in her sleep, and Mei Lin sat quietly, feeling the way her exhaustion fade into something new. Not peace, not yet, but the faintest whisper of it. When Eli stepped outside later to check the horses, the night was calm. Snow glittered under the moon. He thought of the look in that woman's eyes, not just fear, but pride, a kind of strength he hadn't seen in a long time. He didn't know why he'd spoken up in town. Maybe because she reminded him of Mary, his late wife, whose laughter once filled this valley. Maybe because he'd seen too many good souls crushed by cruel men. Either way, it was done. He turned to head back inside and stopped. In the snow near the barn were footprints. Fresh, deep, too large to be his own. He followed them to the edge of the fence line, his hand on his revolver. The tracks vanished into the trees. The woods beyond were dark, silent, watching. Something or someone had been there. Eli scanned the tree line, his breath forming pale clouds in the cold. Nothing moved, but instinct told him they weren't alone. He went back inside quietly, bolted the door, and set his rifle within reach. Mei Lin stirred as he sat by the fire again. "Is something wrong?" she whispered. "Just the wind," he said softly, though his eyes stayed fixed on the window. Outside, deep in the trees, a shadow moved, a man watching from the dark, smoke curling from his cigarette. "Let her have her rest," he muttered to the night. "We'll finish this soon enough." Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of dawn that didn't bring warmth, just light. The snow outside Harrow Ranch had frozen into a crust, cracking under the hooves of restless horses. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, but the room smelled of coffee and wood smoke. Eli Harrow stirred the ashes, the iron poker scraping softly against the hearth. Behind him, Mei Lin wrapped a blanket around Su Mei and Liang. The girl was still pale from fear. The boy sat quietly, his eyes red-rimmed but determined, as if overnight he'd grown older. Eli handed Mei Lin a tin cup of coffee. She hesitated, sniffed it, then nodded politely before sipping. "It's bitter," she said softly. "Yeah," he replied. "So's the world." For a moment their eyes met, two souls worn thin by loss. Then he looked away, adjusting the bandage on his forearm from last night's fight. "Those men," she began. "They will come again." He gave a short nod. "Maybe, maybe not. But if they do, they'll find I don't scare easy." Mei Lin glanced toward the frosted window. "You are one man." Eli took a sip of his coffee. "That's been enough before." She didn't argue, but in her heart, she knew the kind of hate that followed them wouldn't die in silence. A fragile peace. The days that followed were the calm between storms. The kind of peace that never lasted long on the frontier. Eli worked the land, mending fences, feeding the horses, chopping wood. Liang followed him everywhere, eager to help. The boy's silence was slowly replaced by quiet curiosity. Eli showed him how to tie a proper knot, how to saddle a horse, how to listen for rattlesnakes in the grass. Liang watched closely, his small hands trembling at first, but steadying with each lesson. "You got a sharp eye," Eli said one afternoon. "That'll keep you alive out here." The boy smiled, a small thing, but to Mei Lin, it was like seeing sunlight after months of rain. Inside the cabin, Su Mei giggled as she tried to teach Eli a few words in Cantonese. He failed miserably but laughed anyway, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in years. Mei Lin cooked rice and stew in the iron pot, humming softly to herself, a tune from her childhood. Sometimes she'd stop mid-song, realizing she'd forgotten how to hum without fear. Other times she'd stare into flames, haunted by the faces of the men who'd shaved her children's heads. But here, at least, no one threw stones. One afternoon, Eli rode into town for supplies. The moment he stepped into the general store, the room fell silent. Men at the counter stopped talking. A woman at the back crossed her arms, whispering to her friend. "You hear he's got a Chinawoman up at his ranch? 2 bald kids, too. Looks bad for a man like him." Used to think Harrow had sense. Eli ignored the murmurs, paid for his flour and kerosene, and turned to leave. But Sheriff Dunn, tall and broad-shouldered with a face like a brick wall, blocked the door. "Morning, Eli," the sheriff said coolly. "Heard you taken in some new company." Eli's jaw tightened. "Not your business, Dunn." "Oh, it's every man's business when you're harboring criminals." Eli's eyes darkened. "Criminals? Chinawoman and her brat stole from minors. That's theft, Harrow." He took a step closer, his hand resting casually near his revolver. "You bring them in, we'll sort it proper." Eli's voice was calm, but the words had edges. "They're staying put. Then you're obstructing justice." Eli leaned forward. "Then write your damn warrant." The sheriff smirked. "Wouldn't need one if justice came the old way." The meaning was clear. The miners weren't done yet. Eli brushed past him. As he mounted his horse, he could feel the eyes on his back. Suspicion, resentment, cowardice. The town wasn't on his side, and he knew what that meant. Night whispers. That evening, as wind howled over plains, Mei Lin waited by the fire, her hands trembling around a needle and thread. When Eli returned, she saw the shadow on his face before he said a word. "They talked," she said quietly. He nodded. "They'll come." I told you, this danger is mine to bear, not yours. He set down his hat and sat across from her. The firelight flickered over the lines of his face. A man shaped by loss but not yet broken. You think I'd sleep easy knowing you and those kids were out there alone? I think, she said softly, you are kind, but kindness kills too. He almost smiled. So does cowardice. Her eyes glistened. You don't understand. I have seen what men like them do. In China, in California, here. We are not people to them. We are shadows. Then it's time they learn shadows can fight back. For a moment, she saw something in him, a spark of the man he must have been before war, before loneliness, a protector without a reason to protect. Now, he had won. The attack. It began with the dogs. They barked just past midnight, low at first, then frenzied. Eli jolted upright, grabbed his rifle, and moved to the window. Outside, torches flickered like fireflies. Riders, maybe 8, maybe 10, moving fast through the snow. Get the kids, he hissed. Mei Lin woke Liang and Su Mei, her heart pounding. Go to the cellar. Now. Do not come out until I call. Liang hesitated, tears in his eyes. Mama? Now, she said, pushing him toward the trapdoor. Eli took position near the front door, rifle aimed through a crack in the wall. Stay low, he said. The first shot cracked the night. A window shattered. Eli fired back, the recoil slamming against his shoulder. Men shouted from the dark. Bring out the Chinawoman. Burn it down. Flames licked the edge of the porch. Mei Lin grabbed a bucket, dousing the sparks, coughing on smoke. They'll kill us. Not tonight, Eli said, reloading. A man kicked in the back door, a miner with a torch in one hand, revolver in the other. He saw Mei Lin and grinned. Found ya? She didn't think. She swung the iron shovel with all her strength. It cracked across his jaw. He dropped like a stone. Eli turned at the sound, saw her standing there, hair matted with soot, eyes blazing. Good swing, he muttered. Firing again. The fight raged for what felt like forever. Gunfire, shouts, firelight dancing on the walls. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The riders fled, leaving behind smoke and silence. Eli kicked the door open, rifle ready, scanning the trees. Nothing but wind. The front half of the cabin was burned, blackened beams hissing under falling snow. Mei Lin stood in the wreckage, trembling. Liang and Su Mei crawled out of the cellar, crying. Then she saw it, blood darkening Eli's shirt near his shoulder. You're hurt. He looked down, surprised, as if noticing for the first time. Just a graze. But his face was pale. She tore a strip of cloth and pressed it against the wound. You saved us again. He smiled weakly. You helped. She looked around, at the smoldering ruins, at her children, at the man who'd stood against a mob for her, and felt the weight of everything she'd lost and everything she might lose still. Why? She whispered. Why do they hate us so much? Eli looked past her, to the smoking horizon. Because they can't stand what they don't understand. Outside, thunder rumbled over the hills, not from the sky, but from hooves. Distant, growing closer. The sheriff returns. By dawn, the snow had turned to rain. The fire was out, the ranch quiet but ruined. Eli sat at the table, arm bandaged, eyes hollow from exhaustion. Mei Lin poured him water, her hands still shaking. Then came a sound, hoofbeats again, but slower, heavier. She froze. Eli rose, grabbing his rifle. The door opened before he could reach it. Sheriff Dunn stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 deputies. His hat dripped rain. His badge gleamed cold. Well, Dunn said, glancing at the burned walls. Looks like you had visitors. Eli said nothing. Town's real stirred up, Dunn went on. Ain't good for business. Folks say you shot some men last night. They came here to burn my place, Eli said. Dunn shrugged. I don't see any bodies. They dragged 'em off. Convenient. Mei Lin stepped forward. He tells truth. They? Quiet, Dunn snapped. You ain't got the right to speak here. Eli's voice hardened. She does in my house. Dunn turned to him. Not for long. She don't. You bring her and them kids to town. We'll settle it proper. You mean hang him? Eli said. Dunn's smile didn't reach his eyes. The law decide. Your law, Eli muttered. The sheriff tipped his hat. Reckon you got till sundown. When they left, the silence that followed was heavier than any storm. May Lynn turned to Eli, fear rising in her throat. They will kill us. He met her gaze. Not if I can help it. But you're wound. I've had worse. She took his hand before she realized she'd done it. Please, she whispered, don't die for me. He squeezed her fingers gently. Too late for that. That night, the rain turned to sleet, hissing on the burned roof. The children slept in a corner under blankets. May Lynn sat by the window, staring into the black woods beyond the fence. Eli cleaned his gun in silence, the faint metallic clicks echoing like a clock counting down. Finally, she spoke. In my village, she said softly, when the world broke, we used to light candles for the dead. But here, there is no one to remember us. Eli looked up. You're wrong. She frowned. About what? He nodded toward her children. They'll remember, and they'll carry your name further than hate ever will. The words hit her harder than any bullet. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, Thank you. He nodded once. Get some rest. Tomorrow we ride. Ride where? Somewhere they can't find us. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the valley for a heartbeat. In that flash, the ruins of the ranch looked almost alive, like bones of something that had once been good, now ready to be reborn. But in the distance, down by the tree line, figures were already moving through the rain. The dawn broke red over the horizon, bleeding light over the canyon and the smoke that still rose from what used to be Han's camp. May stood by the corral fence, her shawl drawn tight, her hands trembling as she watched her 3 bald children feed the horses. Their laughter, thin, shy, cut to the morning chill. It was the first sound of peace she'd heard in months. But peace didn't last long on the frontier. Han came up beside her, coat unbuttoned, hat tilted low. The light caught the scar along his jaw. He'd been up all night, burying the men who attacked, checking perimeter, loading the rifles. They'll come again, he said. That wasn't all of them. May nodded, her voice quiet. They won't stop until we're gone. He turned to look at her, eyes narrowing. Then we won't stop either. By noon, the canyon had gone silent, except for the restless stomp of horses. Han's ranch, half-burned, half-standing, was alive again with movement. May and the kids helped carry water, mend fence, and sweep ash from a barn. The rhythm of rebuilding was its own kind of healing. But every hammer strike was haunted by what lay beyond the ridge. The men who had tormented them in town, shaved them bald, and chased them into the wild. Han found a bullet casing in the dirt near the well. He crouched, turning it over in his hand. They're close, he muttered. May froze where she stood, the color draining from her face. Then we have to leave. Han shook his head. I built this place with blood. I'm not leaving it to cowards. Her eyes met his, pleading, tired, yet burning with a quiet defiance. Then you'll fight for it, and so will I. Night fell fast that day, as if the sun had no courage left. The stars blinked above the canyon, like cold witnesses. Han and May sat by the fire, her children asleep in the loft. Han poured 2 cups of coffee, his hands rough and scarred. When I found you on that road, he said, I thought you'd slow me down. May gave a soft, rueful smile. And now, he looked into the flames. Now, I think you're the reason I'm still breathing. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped. Wind sighed through the broken boards. Then hoofbeats. Han rose instantly, hand on his gun. Stay here, he whispered. But May was already on her feet, grabbing the shotgun by the door. No, she said, not this time. The riders came in shadows, 5 of them, rifles glinting in the moonlight. The leader was the same man who'd held the scissors to May's hair weeks ago. His sneer was burned into her memory. Evening rancher, he called. Heard you took in a stray Chinawoman and her litter. Thought we'd come fetch what's ours. Han stepped forward into the light, his rifle steady. "You'll fetch lead if you take another step." The leader laughed. "You think this dirt's worth dying over?" Han's voice was iron. "It's the only thing that ever was." The air cracked. A single shot fired from the dark. Then another. Han dropped to one knee, returning fire. May darted to the fence, aiming low. She'd learned to shoot the week before, and now it was muscle memory. What splintered? Horses screamed. A bullet tore through May's sleeve, grazing her skin, but she didn't flinch. One of the attackers fell hard, his rifle tumbling into the dust. "Get back!" Han shouted, but she didn't listen. The leader charged forward, swinging a revolver. May fired first. The blast threw him off his horse. He hit the ground hard, clutching his chest. Silence. Smoke hung heavy, curling around the bodies like fog. When it was over, Han leaned against the corral, bleeding from a shoulder wound. May rushed to him, pressing cloth against the wound. "You're hit," she whispered. He gave a tired smile. "You shoot better than half the men I've ever known." Her hands shook as she tied the cloth tighter. "And now," he looked at her, really looked, "now I know you belong here." By morning, the sky had cleared again, pale blue and endless. The ranch was quiet. The bodies were buried out past the ridge. May's children ran through the yard, chasing a dog Han had rescued months ago. Their laughter carried on the wind. She stood on the porch, her hair just beginning to grow back, and breathed deeply for the first time in a long while. Han joined her, his arm bandaged, his gaze steady on the horizon. "They'll talk about this place," he said. "About the woman who wouldn't bow and the man who wouldn't run." May smiled faintly. "Maybe they'll call it what it is, a home." Han tipped his hat. A hard one, but earned. That night, as the fire flickered low, May wrote something in the dirt beside the barn. A few Chinese characters, worn and simple. Han watched from a distance. "What's it say?" She looked up. "It says begin again." He nodded slowly. "That's what the frontier's for." The camera of the story pulls back. The ranch small against a vast emptiness of prairie. Smoke curling gently. A mother and her children safe at last. And the narrator's voice settles soft, reflective. The frontier didn't care where you came from. It only cared what you could endure, and some found in its cruelty the start of something new. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this: the hardest soil grows the strongest hearts.